this countdown, we have The Sorrows of Young Werther. This book has been famously associated with something referred to as the Werther effect because of the negative impact it had on readers. So this book came out in 1774 and it inspired a huge wave of people taking their lives. It was a terrible epidemic. That's how strong the influence had on its readers. So young men started to copy the main character in the book. They would dress the same as he was portrayed in the book, and then later would take their own lives the way that he did in the book. This caused the book to be banned in countries such as Denmark and Italy. It was so bad that people believed this book was cursed, and every young man that read it will soon be tempted to take their own life, even if they were in the right mindset.
In our number 9 spot today, we have The Orphan's Story. This book was originally written in the early 1600s, but it didn't end up getting published until 2018. The Orphan's Story is about a 14-year-old Spanish boy who heads to the Americas. You know, a classic coming-of-age feel-good story, right? Well, not exactly, and that is the reason it took so long for it to be published. While the curse in this book doesn't come from the story itself, there is something dark lurking in those pages. The book's publisher, Belinda Palacios, who worked on the book for 2 years, explained that throughout those years, she was often warned of the cursed book and how every publisher who had tried to work on it before ended up passing away in a mysterious way before they were able to finish the book. When Belinda looked into this, it turned out to be true. Her research showed that those who tried to edit the book before either found themselves in horrible accidents or with strange illnesses. Luckily, Belinda made it through the process unscathed, so let's hope that maybe the curse has been lifted. Either way, it's probably one I'll personally stay away from.
Moving on to number 8, we have The Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a cursed grimoire that is said to contain summoning spells for over 72 demons, and no one knows who wrote it. What we do know though is that this book contains a bunch of compiled texts from the 17th century. Some of these texts tell the reader how to conjure and control spirits or demons. This book is apparently so cursed that anyone who keeps a copy of it will die or experience constant bad luck. One person who owned a copy of the book reported the book's pages turning on its own. Another time, the book violently flew across the room and towards them. Although we don't know who wrote the book, legend has it that King Solomon originally wrote it for his son. He then asked him to be buried with it. But apparently, when he was getting prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and one of them got a vision from an angel. The angel told him to hide the book from the unworthy, so he decided to cast a spell on it to keep it from getting into the wrong hands. And that's how the book got cursed.
In our number 7 spot today, we have The Untitled Grimoires. A witch's spellbook should never be messed with. I feel like that should be obvious, but I'll put that out there because apparently it isn't. The Untitled Grimoires are a set of handwritten spellbooks that were sold online for $14,000 in 2013. The books were written in the 1960s by a high priestess of Wicca who was the leader of a coven, and they detail things like spells, incantations, enchantments, and instructions on summoning spirits and demons. So, witch stuff. This is all fine and well unless you're sitting there thinking about how you don't believe. If you are a non-believer, it is best to stay as far away as possible from these books. The seller of the books warned that any non-believers who mess with the book will bring upon themselves a deadly curse, and on the first page of the book, the Wiccan herself wrote that proceeding with the book may have serious consequences. It reads, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hands of the craft." I think we can all appreciate the heads up she gave us on this one. Again, this is just another one I'll probably stay far away from, and not just because I don't have $14,000 to spend on a pair of books.
Coming in at number 6, we have The Catcher in the Rye. This book has been linked to a number of murders. It's believed that the book might have inspired these killings. First, we have John Lennon. When John Lennon was shot by Mark David Chapman, apparently he calmly sat down on the curb and started flipping through The Catcher in the Rye as he waited for the police. In fact, inside the book, it was later discovered he wrote, and I quote, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield. This is my statement." And he signed it Holden's name, who is the main character in the book. Furthermore, when police arrested him, he said, and I quote, "I'm sure the big part of me is Holden. The small part of me must be the devil." And during his trial, he even read from the book when it was his turn to address the court. But he's not the only one that's been influenced by this book. After John Hinckley Jr.'s assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, it was discovered he too was a fan of the book, and a copy was even found on the table in his hotel room. And lastly, let's talk about Robert John Bardo. He took the life of Rebecca Schaefer. Well, he had the book in his back pocket while he did the deed. The list goes on and on. There are a dozen more people that apparently got inspired by this book and went on to harm or take someone's life. So some people believe that this book is in fact cursed and will drive the sane insane.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. When you're a practitioner of magic, you probably don't give the same sort of gifts that non-magic folk do. So it is no surprise that Abramelin gifted his son a book of spells and curses. In the early 1900s, this book was translated into English, and ever since then, there have been rumors swirling that the book is cursed, which makes a ton of sense considering, like I mentioned, it is a book of curses. Rumor has it that the cursed nature of this book in part has to do with Abramelin's belief that everyone has their own personal demon. The book holds instructions on how to get your demons under control through rituals and supernatural situations, and it is always risky to reach out to the spirit world, so maybe that's why everyone is feeling like this book is cursed. It's looking like unless you absolutely know what you're doing, the contents of this book just might be too powerful. Those who have had bad experiences with the book explain either bad luck or hauntings from the spirit world are what await for those who dare to read it.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is this massive 310-page book said to harness evil and negative energy. It was discovered in 1648 and is 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, 8.7 inches thick, and weighs 165 pounds. So now there's this really creepy legend surrounding it. Legend goes that the book was written by a monk, but this monk broke his spiritual vows and his punishment was to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. The night before his death, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish this book. So he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that this book was finished by the devil himself. To make things creepier, this book is filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. On one page, there's a 19-inch frightening drawing of Satan. And apparently the book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and facts like how to perform exorcisms. To top it all off, apparently at some point the book contained 320 pages, not just 310. Those 10 pages were ripped out because they instructed people on how to summon the devil. And thank gosh for that.
In our number 3 spot today, we have the Book of Soiga. This one is often referred to as the Book of Death, and that alone is enough to deter me. If you happen to be braver than I, unfortunately it is unlikely that you'll be able to actually read parts of this book because nobody knows what language it is written in. While the first part of the book details different spells and incantations, the ending part is the most mysterious and where the secrets lie. All the letters in the final part are written in separate boxes, and despite people trying their absolute best, it is extremely difficult to decipher. An Elizabethan scholar named John Dee attempted to decode the book, and he apparently called on an angel named Uriel for help. The angel explained to him that only the Archangel Michael is able to interpret the text. Apparently after John Dee passed away, this book mysteriously vanished, seemingly into thin air. This was in 1608, and for years and years no one could find it until it magically reappeared again in the 19th century. I don't know about you guys, but to me that sounds like some real magic. The catch with this one, however, is that it is said that whoever deciphers the meaning of the code will inevitably die 2.5 years later. So I guess this is like the Ring of books?
In our second spot, we have the Prophecies of Nostradamus. We've talked about this dude a bunch on this channel. Basically, he's a really famous seer and prophet. He's most famous for his book Les Prophéties, which contains hundreds of predictions for future events. And what's scary is that a bunch of these predictions have come true, such as JFK's assassination, the creation of the atomic bomb, rain, and the Great Fire of London, so on and so on. So he's got some credibility. But here's the thing. Are these actually predictions, or are they a list of curses Nostradamus set out for us? A number of people think that it's the second option, and that he literally has cursed us all. He has made these things happen even from beyond the grave. In fact, he managed to curse his grave, so what says he doesn't have the power to curse a book too? Like literally he warned everyone, whoever opens my tomb will be cursed. And guess what? Legend goes that one day during a war, a couple of soldiers accidentally dug up his grave. When they did, they found him with a plaque that said 1793 on it. That was the year they opened the grave. So he predicted when his grave would be disturbed. Not only that, one of the soldiers picked up his skull and immediately was shot dead by a sniper. So yeah, the soldiers were cursed by him, and now we're all cursed by him and this book.
In our number 1 spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. This book is often referred to as the book with incredible power and has been called one of the darkest books in the world. While the author of this book is still unknown, the contents of it are things like black magic and dark, spooky secrets. It is believed that the book was written sometime around 1521, and it is split into 2 books. Book 1 details instructions on how to summon a demon and how to get the demon to do your bidding. The second book is split into 2 parts, and it details how to make a pact with a demon and how to command the spirit, but with less tools, which means it is significantly riskier than the instructions in the first book. Apparently in the book it even details how someone can call upon Lucifer or the devil. The book describes a few different demons, and it also gives spells that one can do for things like winning the lottery, love spells, becoming invisible. You know, while those spells certainly sound nice, magic like that always comes at a cost. People fear the Grand Grimoire because they worry that if anyone reads it fully, then the devil will enslave their soul. No thank you.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is a massive book said to harbor an immense amount of negative energy. I mean, duh, it's called the Devil's Bible for a reason. So basically, legend goes that this 157-pound book was written by a monk. But this monk broke his spiritual vows, and so he was sentenced to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. But the night before his death, he realized he wouldn't be able to finish this book. So he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete the book for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that the book was finished by the devil himself. What's creepier is that some of the pages are filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. On one page, there's a 19-inch drawing of Satan. The book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and texts. If the book got in the wrong hands, who knows what damage they could do.
Coming in at number 9, we have the Voynich manuscript, a book that has baffled all of the best minds in the world. It was discovered by antiquarian book dealer Wilfred M. Voynich near Rome in an old chest in 1912. It immediately caught his attention due to its lackluster appearance, which was unlike all the other pretty ones in the compartment. But what he found inside became a mystery that keeps getting stranger. Apparently the codex was purchased by Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who believed it was written by Roger Bacon. But Bacon lived in the 12th century and the paper carbon dated to the 15th century, so already Inside the book has remained incomprehensible to even the most impressive cryptographers and linguists. They've identified at least 25 to 30 characters, and though the writing and illustrations don't make sense, it doesn't appear to be gibberish. Alan Turing all the way to artificial intelligence have all taken turns, but to no avail. From images of planets long extinct and intricate astrological signs, no one knows what the hell it means, but many speculate that it could have been written, get ready for this, by aliens. Of course, when we don't know the answer, aliens! It's the only logical solution. But if it does belong to aliens, what if they want it back?
And at number 8 we have Untitled Grimoires. Grimoires are witches' spell books, but it's said that they need to be burned after the witch's death. However, this one was not burned. Instead, it was kept, and in 2013 it sold on a website. It was sold for $13,865. That's a lot of money for a book. But here's the thing, the book came with a warning. It said, and I quote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." So basically, the book is cursed if it falls into the wrong hands. This book is also said to contain a number of curses, enchantments, and spells. Also, it tells you how to perform an exorcism, you know, just in case you summon a demon and then everything goes wrong. I mean, any book that tells you how to summon ghosts and demons should just be burned. I'm sorry.
Coming in at number 7, we have Tomino's Hell, and here is yet another book that you should never read. Because if you do, your lives and the lives of those you love could be in jeopardy. Tomino's Hell was written by Yamamoto Uniko in a book that's titled The Heart is Like a Rolling Stone. Legends of how this curse started vary, but results such as vomiting glass and loved ones dying tragic deaths continue to be associated with the poem. One radio show host tried to read it aloud on air, and halfway through started to feel ill and disturbed and wasn't able to finish it. He continued to feel ill, and a few days later he got into an accident that resulted in him having to get 7 stitches. To this day, he tries not to even think about the poem and warns other people against it. But I thought I'd surprise everyone today and read the poem out loud, so we'll see. But let's see if this myth is true, shall we? Here's the poem. Just kidding! I'm not gonna read it out loud, and nor should you.
In our 6th spot, we have the Book of Soiga. Sounds weird. I don't know if I pronounced it wrong, but we're gonna roll with that. This book has quite the history behind it. So it was created in the 16th century and is a Latin essay all about demonology. Apparently, there are only 2 copies in existence. One was owned by a man named John Dee and his brother. They both were determined to translate the entire book. Upon translating it, they figured it was a book filled with dark rituals and incantations. But the last 36 pages were untranslatable. He became so obsessed with trying to figure out what the last pages read that it drove him to madness. After his death, the books were lost for the longest time until 1994. That's when 2 copies were found. Now legend goes that those that successfully decipher the final pages of the book will die within 3 years. So it's up to you. Will you tempt fate and decipher the pages? Or should we burn the book so that no one else dies? I'll go with the latter.
The Orphan Story, coming in at number 5. This book started out innocent until it started racking up victims. The Orphan Story is an adventure book about a Spanish teen who ventures to Lima to party like there's no tomorrow, and then there's other adventures and romantic stories and yada yada yada. It was written by an Augustinian friar named Martin de Leon between 1605 to 1615, who'd also been to Lima, but he never wanted to get it published for fear that it would taint his chances in becoming archbishop, but that didn't stop people from trying, and maybe it should have. When it was rediscovered in the Hispanic history archives, many were discouraged from working on it as it was believed to be cursed. Dun dun dun! Those who had tried to publish it before had all died, one from a random car accident and the other from an entirely mysterious disease. No one touched it for years until one brave man took on the task once more. It was actually published for the first time in 2018, and the publisher believes that the curse has finally been lifted. Not that there wasn't a curse in the first place, but like maybe things will get worse now, who knows? Maybe the curse is waiting for, I don't know, 3 years.
In our 4th spot, we have the Book of Sacred Magic. This 15th century book was written by a man named Abra Malin, who was a mage, aka that's just a fancy word for a magician. Well, he wrote this book for his son, and apparently it's cursed, because why not give your son a cursed book? I mean, it probably wasn't cursed when he got it, but that's besides the point. Anyways, in the 1900s, the book was translated into English, and soon after, people deemed it a curse. Throughout the book, it talked about rituals on how to control your demons. Abra believed that every person had their own demon, not like a metaphorical one, but like a literal one. It also talked about how to perform other supernatural acts. In the end, it was believed that whoever owns a copy will be haunted by the spirits, and bad luck will befall on them. Again, possessions and haunting and bad luck, it's a no from me.
Coming in at number 3 with the Necromonicon. Again, I'm gonna bring this up, but you know that scene from The Mummy when Evie is like, what harm has ever come from reading a book? And then proceeded to unleash hell by reading the Book of the Dead? Well, lesson learned, right? No, because the Necromonicon, also called the Book of the Dead, is an ancient grimoire, and as we know, we should burn grimoires, but we don't. And it's bound in human skin and has inspired many horror films like Evil Dead. This book is so powerful, some even say one word from its pages and horrors beyond your wildest nightmares will emerge. This book was featured as a fictional object in H.P. Lovecraft's stories, and he even allowed authors to cite it as a source so it could become more real. Lovecraft insisted it was made up, but many tried and true fans of the occult think otherwise. They think that the book in fact exists, but it's hidden so it will never cause any harm. HP says the idea for the book came to him in a dream, but many say that the spirit of the book chose Lovecraft to reveal it, meaning there are people hunting for the real thing. My advice? Don't. Leave it alone. Again, we don't need it. Demons can stay where they are, okay?
In our second spot, we have The Great Omar. This is another book that has quite the dark past. So basically, in 1909, a man named Sangorsky decided to create a much fancier version of the book, The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. I'm gonna apologize right now, I know I totally butchered that name. Now, he bejeweled it and made the cover look absolutely beautiful. It took him 2,500 hours to create. In the end, it had 1,500 precious/semi-precious stones, 4,967 leather inlays, and 600 sheets of 22-karat gold leaf. It's honestly a very beautiful book. But the thing is, no one wanted to buy this super expensive book when they could literally just get one for much cheaper. But eventually it was put up for auction, but it only sold for £450. Now, the book was shipped, but it never got to the buyer. Why? Well, the ship it was being transported on was the Titanic, and the book went down with the ship. Then only a few weeks later, the creator of this book mysteriously drowned. Ain't that a freaky coincidence? But that's not all. A second version was created called The Great Omar II. It was then placed in a bank vault, but the bank was hit by a bomb during the London Blitz of World War II, and this copy was destroyed as well. Then a third copy was created because they didn't learn their lesson, and it was donated to the British Library, where apparently it's still to this day. But due to its dark past, many believe that this book is cursed, and that bad things will happen to whoever owns it.
Coming in at number 1, you know what sucks is that there's a PDF version of this book that Lindsay and I found, and we were both like, no! Like, we opened it by accident, we're like, no, I don't want to read this, I don't want to read this, I don't want to read this. It's really creepy. So this one is The Lesser King of Solomon. The Lesser King of Solomon, or the Goetia, is one of the most famous grimoires and contains a summoning spell for over 72 demons, and no one knows who wrote it. Written entirely in Latin, the book dates back to the 14th and 15th century, though any remaining manuscripts date to the 16th and 18th. Legend has it that King Solomon originally had it written for his son and asked him to bury it with him in his grave when he died. But supposedly, a group of Babylonian philosophers discovered it while repairing his tomb, and one of them was said to have had a vision sent to him by an angel that told him to hide the book from the unworthy. He did so by casting a spell on it, which clearly didn't work. The first few chapters contained instructions on how to summon and trap demons in this world, which, by the way, why? I doubt they're as sexy as Lil Nas, okay? But if you're looking for love, the book also contains instructions on how to find it and also how to become invisible. Obviously now, copies of this book can be found on the internet, but please, for the love of all this stuff, like, just don't. Just burn it, you know? Have someone burn it from the internet. It's just too much out there. We don't want to know what's on the other side just yet, anyways.
Alright, this book seems to be a favourite amongst murderers at number 10. We have The Catcher in the Rye, which you shouldn't read unless you want to go mad. Oddly, The Catcher in the Rye seemed to inspire two very high-profile shootings, the murder of John Lennon and the attempted murder of Ronald Reagan. John Lennon was shot dead on the 8th of December 1980 by Mark David Chapman. The lone gunman from Texas was found to be obsessed with J.D. Salinger's novel and was found calmly reading it on a curb nearby his attack on Lennon prior to his arrest. It seems he wrote his statement inside the novel too. He felt like if he carried out the assassination, he would become Holden Caulfield, the protagonist of the novel. 5 months later, on March the 30th, 1981, John Hinckley carried out an assassination attempt on the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. It seems that Hinckley's motivation was a weird attempt to win over actress Jodie Foster, whom he had an obsession with. When Hinckley was caught, he was found with a copy of none other than The Catcher in the Rye. Coming in at number 9, we have The Orphan's Story. This story was written by a Malaga monk between 1608 and 1615. Now, it's about an orphan from Granada who travelled to the Spanish Empire to seek his fortune. For some reason, the transcript never made it to print, and everyone that seemed to be associated with it died. The manuscript was lost for centuries, some say hidden away because of the curse. Then a string of publishing attempts failed and people just started dying. The book, however, is to be finally published. But According to Palacios, a Peruvian editor said that she was regularly warned off the project because of the string of untimely deaths associated with the book. She said it's taken a while because the people who have worked on it died from one strange disease or in car accidents. I think that this is one book that I would steer clear of. Okay, this book may kill you, but not because of demons or devils, but because of cancer. Wait, a book that gives you cancer? Awful. That's right, coming in at number 8, we have Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. When Bradbury's 1953 book about a dystopian future came out, the marketing team had a wise idea. The book is about a group of so-called firemen who burn down the homes and belongings of people who read illegal, non-state approved books. Wouldn't it be cool for the limited edition books to be fireproof? It sure would. The only issue was that people didn't know what was what in the 1950s, and the book was bound with asbestos. You know, the substance that gives you lung cancer. Not great. So while the book in itself is a bit of a scary read, the reality of the book is even scarier. Coming in at number 7, we have the Voynich manuscript. Who knows what is happening and what is contained within the text of the Voynich manuscript? The text is regularly alluded to as the world's most mysterious book. Written in the early 15th century, what the 240-page cryptic text actually says is still a mystery, and it has baffled humans for 600 years. It appears to be written in an unknown language and contains strange illustrations and diagrams. The book has been passed down from emperors and important members of society, eventually falling into the hands of a Polish book dealer. A 2006 book by Nicholas Pelling claims that the text is cursed. Others think that it was secretly dropped on Earth by aliens. There are hopes that Canadian computer scientists may have invented a machine that will be able to decode the enigmatic text. Who knows what we'll discover? Almost as intriguing as what the text said is who or what wrote it. We still don't know. Coming into number 6, we have the Codex Gigas. The Codex is a hefty old chap weighing 165 pounds, so more than me. The text heralds from the 12th century and is referred to as the Devil's Bible. Why? Well, according to the legends, the monk who wrote the text had broken his vow and was due to be walled to death. So what actually happens when somebody's walled to death? Well, it's a bit like being buried alive, but instead you're bricked up in a wall, like in a really small space until you run out of air and die in the wall. Really not ideal. In fact, I feel like it happens in an episode of Jonathan Creek, so if anyone watches that, shout out to you. Anyway, the night before his death, he wanted to create a book on all human knowledge, but he realized that, you know what, that's actually not a long time to write a book. He summoned Lucifer and asked him to finish it for him in exchange for his already damned soul. Apparently this is why there's a picture of the devil in the manuscript. But it's not just any picture, it's a 19-inch tall picture. So, a text written by the devil, surely no good can come from reading it. Coming into number 5, we have the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is an early 16th century treatise on demonology written in Latin. There are only 2 copies of the book in the world, and one was possessed by Elizabethan scholar John Dee, who spent his life trying to interpret the text. Basically, the text is filled with spells and rituals, and it's kinda creepy. He had a pretty good grasp of what was happening, except for the final 36 pages, which he simply couldn't decipher. He and his trusted friend Edward Kelly summoned the spirit Uriel to tell them the meaning of the last pages. Now, the legend says that Uriel possessed Kelly and spoke through him. He claimed that the book came into existence when Adam entered paradise, and that it could only be properly interpreted by Archangel Michael himself. He also said that whoever does decipher the meaning of the final 36 pages will be destined to die 2.5 years after they do so. Coming into number 4, we have the prophecies of Nostradamus. Did Nostradamus curse us, or were his texts a warning? The 16th century French physician wrote a collection of 942 poetic prophecies, many of which have come true. A lot of people think that these quatrains were, like his grave, cursed. If he had the power to curse his grave, why wouldn't his poetry be cursed? Nostradamus famously prophesied the Great Fire of London, the death of King Henry II, the French Revolution, vaccination, the rise of Hitler, the atomic bombs, 9/11 and more. We just don't know what they are yet. Reading these texts may not curse you, but then again, knowledge of a terrible event without the ability to change the outcome must be a great curse indeed. Coming into number 3, we have the Great Omar. The Francis Sangorski special edition of the Great Omar is for sure cursed. Not only was the original one of the most blinging books around, it seemed to be on the receiving end of some seriously bad juju. Emblazoned with gold leaf, gemstones, and peacock feathers, the original copy of the Great Omar sank on board the Titanic and is lost somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean. Sangorski then died just 6 weeks later as he drowned in an accident in the English Channel. A second copy was made by Stanley Bray, recreating the original. Now that copy was destroyed in the London Blitz. A third copy was then painstakingly recreated by Bray once again, who died just 5 years later. When asked about the book's tragic history, Bray said, "I'm not in the least bit superstitious, even though they do say that the peacock is a symbol of disaster. I'll say." Now the only surviving copy now lays in the British Library. Visit if you dare. This isn't a book up next, but it is a poem which really is just kind of a short lyrical book. Now I'm not sure you're ready for this, but people who read this poem are doomed to die. In at number 2 we have Tamino's Hell. I know that all men must die and all of that, but Tamino's Hell is said to speed the process way up. The poem is a 1919 Japanese work of literature that is cursed, 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 and cursed again. It's supposed to cause death and tragedy if you read it aloud, so just don't do it. The poem tells the story of a young boy's damnation, his sickness as he vomits blood and travels to the blackest of hells. Lovely jubbly. It isn't just Japanese readers who need to be a bit worried. The poem has been translated into English. Now reading the poem is fine, feel free, even though it is kind of gross. What you don't want to do though is read it aloud in any language, unless, well, just actually don't do it. Finally at number 1 we have one of the most cursed and spooky books in the entire history of print. We have the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is often referred to as the Gospel of Satan or the Red Dragon Text, and it is a book of spells believed to possess insane powers, but beyond that, it's said to be one of the most intense and potent occult books in existence. Written in the 16th century, the incantation book tells the reader how to summon the dead, and also how to summon powerful demons. Deeper sections of the book allegedly tell the reader how to do a deal with the devil. The book was said to be written by a man who was possessed by Satan. Now the original text is so dangerous that it is allegedly held in storage by the Vatican's secret archives. The book is so mysterious and famous that it is frequently referenced in pop culture.